now, which is awesome. Okay, let's see if okay. Okay, good. Emily's there. So that means it's working. So is the connection better with this one? We kind of keep playing around with different platforms that work better. Oh, good. Emily says it's better so far. So fingers crossed. I honestly need to live next to my brother because my brother's a computer guy, and he hi Kathy, I haven't seen you for so long. Okay, so we have Kathy Collins from Utah. Jordan, where are you from? Jordan Ruby, if you can let me know where you're from. So with this is the other platform where the questions just come through as Facebook user with some groups. So you just need to put your name and where you're from so that I can enter you into the drawing. Okay, so I'm going to go back up. How to stop counter surfing. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is environmental management. So keep things off the counter or limit your dog's access into the kitchen. So like I have a baby gate because I have a dog on prednisone and she will break into the cupboards and eat everything. So I actually have a baby gate that limits my dogs from going into the kitchen. But if I do want to let them in, I will usually put them in a sit or a down. And then when I'm done with whatever, I put things away so I don't leave stuff on the counters, because dogs are opportunists, which means they're going to do what works for them. So if there's food left on the counter, they're going to jump up and get it. So the easiest thing to do is manage your environment, make it so that your dog either doesn't have access or, put them in a downstay on a mat or have them sit while you're cooking, and then make sure you put everything away. If they jump up on the counter, you can teach an off. So to do off, like I'll put a treat right in front of the dog's nose and I'll say off and lure them off. And then as soon as their paws leave the counter, then that's when I click and give the treat. And then I'll put them in a sit or a down. So I actually teach an off. When I first got Jade, she was a counter surfer. In fact, she would just jump on the kitchen table. And I only had to do off a couple of times with her, and just kind of, I'd say, hey, off. Oh, we don't get on the table. And she learned within a week that it's not okay to jump up on the counter or the table. So just kind of doing that off. Now, some dogs are very smart, and they will learn that if they jump up on the counter, that you'll tell them off and then give them a treat. So I only give a treat like the first 2 or 3 times, and then if the dog keeps doing it, then I will still do off, but then I will just do praise and affection. I don't give treats every time. Otherwise, the dogs will learn that that's kind of a little trick where they jump up and then they get a treat for getting off. I'm just writing down some more names. So hello, Lisa from Canada. I got Rachel from Ohio. So yeah, here's another one from about counter surfing. My 4-month lab has started to reach the counter and pick up stuff. Yeah, so if you're in there cooking, you can put your dog in a sit stay and a down stay, do place work like mat work. So like when you're cooking, it's like, okay, go to your place, You can give your dog like a bully stick or a stuffed Kong or something like that. Give them something to do on their mat while you're doing stuff in the kitchen. Again, you could use a baby gate to, well, I think it said, you said you have an open kitchen, so that doesn't help. I am lucky enough that I have like a wall, so I can put a baby gate there and keep the dogs from going in the kitchen. So I would teach an off command. But if your dog does jump up, but I would also put them in a downstay and start doing place work and mat work. The other thing that you can do is if you're in the kitchen and you have lots of food on the counter, it is okay to crate your dog with a toy or something to chew on so that they're busy in their crate and you can do what you need to do in the kitchen without the dog's help, so to speak. Then when you're done, make sure that you put everything away. Don't leave stuff on the counters so that the dog doesn't have the opportunity. Because every time the dog has the opportunity to jump on the counter and grab food, that's reinforcing for them, so they're going to continue to do it. So hopefully that will give you some ideas. Usually when my dogs come in the kitchen, not that I do a ton of cooking, actually I don't do very much at all, but when I am in there like getting anything ready, I put them in a sit stay. And then if they break their stay, I'll just put them back and say, hey, back into a sit stay. And then when I'm done, I put everything away. Then I give them a treat for doing a nice sit stay and not like getting up on the counters, if that makes sense. Okay, so this is the one that I have issues scrolling with sometimes, so I need to write down. Okay, so we've got Perva from Melbourne, Rosalie from New York, Melissa from Minnesota, Karen from Miami. That's why I like this platform better, because we can have so many more people join us, which is awesome. Okay, this is not scrolling. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, how to calm a puppy who is overstimulated, jumping, biting. Okay, that is a great question. So I'm going to talk about positive reinforcement for a second. So reinforcement means if we reinforce a behavior, that means the behavior is going to continue. Positive means we're going to add something. So if a puppy's jumping, and even if you say like, okay, off, get down, don't jump, whatever. And if you're touching the dog, pushing the dog off, you're still inadvertently reinforcing that behavior because you're giving the dog attention, because dogs are jumping for attention. So the best thing to do is what we call negative punishment, which the negative means we're going to take something away. All punishment means is that we want a behavior to not continue. So if a puppy's jumping, you turn your back and ignore until the dog has 4 feet on the floor. But then you can also teach the dog what you want them to do instead. And usually for greeting, we do sit, because if a dog is sitting, then he's not jumping. So if a dog jumps on me when I walk through the door of a client's house, I turn my back, I ignore the dog, and then I'll turn around and ask the dog to sit, and then I give the dog a treat or say hi, give them attention, things like that. With biting, you can do the same thing. So it's normal for puppies to bite. It's what they do when they're with their litter mates. So I will sometimes say like, ouch, too hard. And then you can get up and walk away and remove your attention, remove your play. I learned this from another trainer and I think it's brilliant. So I've been sharing it every week. So with biting, it's not enough to just, like walk away or say ouch, but we always want to teach the dog what we want them to do instead. And a lot of times, depending on the age, they're teething as well. So First time they bite, then you redirect them to a toy. It's like, oh, sorry, you can't bite me, but here's a Kong wobbler that you can go play with, or here's your Nylabone or your Kong or your rope toy. So redirect them to a toy. Then if they leave the toy and come back and bite you, then the second time, calmly pick them up with a toy and put them in their crate for like 1 to 2 minutes to let them, because they are overstimulated. So it kind of lets them chill, lets them calm down. We want the toy in there because we don't want it to be a punishment. And so just do it for like 1 to 2 minutes, let the dog out. If it happens a third time, then again, you calmly put the dog in the crate with a toy, cover the crate, and leave the dog in there for half hour to an, I mean, basically the dog needs to decompress, take a nap, stuff like that. So yeah, crating is good. Think about why the dog is jumping, why the dog is biting, usually for attention or they want to play. So we want to make sure we're not reinforcing that. In fact, I've seen videos of people like flailing their arms, and kids do this a lot too. They're like, the dog's biting me. But to the dog, the puppy thinks they're playing because they have high-pitched voices, they're flailing their arms. So if you can just like walk away, but then redirect the dog into what you want them to do instead. So instead of biting me, I want you to chew on your toy. Instead of jumping, I want you to sit. Things like that. So hopefully that helps. How to train a dog not to run away from the house. Okay, so I need a little bit more information. So I live on a highway. So if I go out my front door, my dogs are on a leash because all my neighbors have dogs, and I don't want to take the chance of them running like to the neighbors and getting hit by a car. So if I'm outside, if we're not like up in the mountains or in a fenced area, my dogs are on leash. You could teach like a good recall. So, I mean, do you keep your dog outside all the time, or does your dog like bolt through the door and then run away? Because if your dog does that, I would teach a sit and a wait. So I would teach a wait command, which means you wait until I put the leash on and until I say, okay, let's go. So that's like an impulse control exercise. I had dogs that would spend time with me in the yard, and if they started to go into somebody else's yard, I would just say, hey, back in your yard. And they finally learned like what their perimeter was, just because if they went over the perimeter, I would call them back, and they were really good about coming back. These dogs, unfortunately, are deceased, so I'm starting now with new dogs. But they learned what their perimeter was, and they didn't leave. Like I could do yard work and everything, and they would just always stay with me and stay in their yard. So you can even go around the perimeter of your house, and even I read one protocol where they put like white flags, and you get near the flag, and then you call the dog back in the yard and like toss treats back this way from the flag so that good things happen on this side. And if your dog starts to go past the flag, then you can say, hey, back this way, let's stay in the yard, and then give them a treat for staying in the yard. So I would need a little bit more information to know exactly why your dog's running away from the house, or how you're containing your dog outside, like if you have a fence and stuff like that, then I can answer that better. Okay, now I got to get this to scroll again. Okay, Emily, okay, now my question is about barking. Um, okay, let's see. My dog barks, growls, whines at people outside the house, and when they come in. When they're walking past the house, I send her to the crate when she starts barking until she's quiet. Then I let her out. Oh, yeah, I think I've already answered. Um, I answered the first part. So the second part, when someone comes inside, she rushes to them super excitedly and doesn't leave them alone. Okay, so I have that same issue with Jade. Jade will rush up to somebody and start to jump because she's so excited to see them. And I instruct people, I say, if my dog jumps on you, I want you to turn your back and ignore them. But then I step in and I say, Jade, sit. And then she'll sit, and then I will tell people, okay, now you can pet her when she's sitting. So I would teach like a sit and a wait at the door, and have her wait until you say, okay, now you can go say hi, and teach her how to say hi calmly to people instead of rushing. So I actually did this today with a client where we knocked on the door, we put the dog in a sit and a wait, and I do differentiate between wait and stay. But if you want to stay, you can think about like wait a second. So we put the dog in a sit, wait, and then the owner started to open the door. If the dog rushed the door, she closed the door. And I was on the other side, so I didn't mind. But sometimes I've even put up a sign on my door that says dog in training. Thank you for your patience. Don't be offended if I close the door in your face, or something like that. So when the dog rushes the door closes and they don't get to see the person. Then when they're waiting again, they open the door and then they invite the person in, and then they calmly say to the dog, okay, now you can go say hi. And that's worked. I mean, I've seen progress just between last week and this week. The first time, the dogs usually always break their wait because they're really excited to see somebody, but owner just closes the door. And then that person goes away. So if the dog moves before you release them, the door closes and they don't get to see the person. If the dog waits, the door continues to open, and then you can invite them in, and then you can release the dog to go say hi. For the crate, if you put her in the crate and she screams and stuff, I would ignore that, because that's like demand, like I want out of my crate. So there's a couple of things you can do. You can put her in the crate and ignore the whining, barking, whatever, and wait for her to be quiet for a second or two, and wait for that 1 to 2 seconds of quiet, and then say, oh, good job, good, calm, and then let her out when she's calm. So ignore her if she's screaming, whining, barking, and only let her out when she's calm. The other thing I would do is start working on the relaxation protocol. So if you Google Karen Overall's relaxation protocol, or if you email or message me and remind me, I will send you a copy. So that actually teaches a dog how to be calm with increasing distractions. So you start with mat work, and then you start with like 5 seconds of calm, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then you work your way up. There's like 14 days, but you only go as fast as your dog can go. So you might be on the same step for like 4 days, but then you eventually like knock on the door and the dog stays on the bed and is quiet and calm. So you add distractions in very slowly, but then you start adding in like knocking on the door, and then you can add like people coming in, things like that. So I would either do the sit and the wait at the door, and then teach your dog how to calmly greet. So the same dog that we did the sit and the wait with, as soon as I come in the door and she releases, the dog's jumping all over. So I have to turn my back like 4 or 5 times, and then I put the dog in a sit. And then when the dog is sitting, then I say hi to them. So I totally ignore the dog when I walk in until the dog is calm. And if I have to keep turning my back, usually when I tell the dog to sit, he'll sit. And then I say hi and pet him, and he gets excited and jumps again. So we just keep doing the same thing. I turn my back and then ask the dog to sit and only give the dog attention when they're sitting so that they learn how to calmly greet people. But I feel your pain because I'm working on the same thing with my dog. She gets so excited to see people and she will listen. Like if I say, Jade, hey, off. And I have taught her an off cue, but then I also have to tell her to sit. And then people only are allowed to pet her and say hi if she's sitting. So hopefully that will help. Okay, let's see. I gotta figure out how to scroll again. Kayla from Indiana. I don't think I got you. My cousins, a couple years, they loved it. They're back in Idaho now. Okay, Lisa. My 5-month-old chocolate lab keeps jumping at the doors. He pushes the door handles down every time we close a door. Okay, so we had dogs that did this at the rescue when I worked there, and my office has a regular doorknob. So what we did is we had a volunteer that would come and do all this work there. He was amazing. He actually flipped it upside down, which was hard for me to get used to because I was always used to like pushing down on it. But then, so then to go through the door, you had to lift the lever up instead of down, but then the dogs couldn't jump on and push it down. It was brilliant and it worked. We changed all of our doorknobs. We flipped them around. And so then if the dogs pawed at them or tried to push them down, they weren't going to go anywhere. So that's one thing, especially if you have the lever doors, that works great just to turn them upside down. It might be a little weird for you for a while because then you've got to like, instead of pushing it down, you just got to lift it up. But it solved the problem of our dogs escaping outside or into the kitchen or something like that. If you catch your dog doing it, you can also like call them away, do a leave it cue. Just make sure that you have like a higher value treat, so that it's like, oh, leave the door, but come to me and I'll give you a treat. So you could try that as well, but a quick fix is just to flip your lever upside down. Okay, let's see. She picked the microfiber today from the counter. Oh, wow. So yeah, I would, for counter surfers, I like to teach an off. And then I like to put the dog in a sit stay. And another thing I didn't mention is when, if I'm in the kitchen doing stuff and my dogs are in a sit stay, I will intermittently reward them for doing a sit stay instead of jumping on the counters. And that has seemed to work because now I actually have 3 dogs that are not counter surfers. Like I said, when I first brought Jade home, she was awful. She would go from a sitting position and she could be on the kitchen table in one jump. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you doing on the kitchen table? So I taught her an off. We worked on it for like a week. And then she realized, but the other thing too is I didn't leave food or anything on there that she could get. So she never got reinforced for jumping on there. So, yeah, try teaching an off, but then also teach a sit stay. You can also teach a leave it. So, leave what's on the counter and I'll give you something better. So that's the way I teach leave it is you leave that, but I will give you something better than that. So I always ask them to leave one item, but then I give them something better. So you could try that as well. Okay, let me write down Julie K from Long Island. We have a lot of New Yorkers here tonight. I love it. Okay, I've got to scroll again. It always takes a second to scroll. I'm not sure why. Oh, here we go. Do you utilize off to train not to jump on people? Yes, I do. So I teach off first so that my dogs know an off cue. And what I do is I put a treat right in front of their nose and I'll say off, and then I lure them off. And as soon as their paws leave the people, that's when I click and treat. So I do teach an off, but when people come through, I also instruct people, turn your back, ignore my dog if she's jumping on you. And so then I will say, like, Jade, off, sit. And then I'll put her in a sit. And then I tell people, okay, now you can say hi to her when she's sitting. Then if she gets excited and jumps again, I'll tell her off, have people turn their back, and then I'll put her in a sit. So she's getting better. She's learning now that if she jumps on people, she's not going to get attention. But if she sits, then she's going to get attention and probably treats, because I keep treats around just so when the dogs are doing something good, then people can reward them. So yes, I do teach an off cue, because I use that for counter surfing too. So if a dog tries to jump up on the counter, I'll say, hey, off. But then the important thing is to then teach the dog what you want them to do instead. So instead of jumping up on people, instead of jumping up on the counter, I want you to sit. I want you to do a downstay. This is what I want you to do. So I hope that answered your question. So I'm writing down Jennifer from Virginia, Stephanie from Philly, Megan from California, Orange County. I think that's where my mom's from. Is that where Costa Mesa? My mom was raised in Costa Mesa, and we used to go there to my grandma's every summer. And I think that's Orange County. I can't remember. My grandma ended up moving to Utah, so we haven't been to California for years. Okay, I like this next question. So, thoughts on e-collars? My 10-month-old Husky mix is starting a trainer that uses them next week. Okay. I personally would find a different trainer because I don't believe in e-collars. I will tell you that 20 years ago, I did use them. We used them on our search and rescue dogs. Here's the problem with e-collars. Since dogs learn by association, and I especially would not put an e-collar on a puppy. I'll be honest. I had a lady call me last week that says, I have totally screwed up my dog with an e-collar and now he's really aggressive. Can you come help? So because dogs learn by association, let's say you shock a dog in the presence of another dog or in the presence of a child. So let's say the dog wants to go up and just say hi to a kid and he gets shocked. In the dog's mind, it's like, oh, every time I see other dogs or every time I see people or every time I want to go say hi to a kid, I feel pain. So kids are bad, dogs are bad, people are bad. So they can associate that pain from the shock collar with whatever they're focusing on. So one of the side effects of using positive punishment, positive means we add something. So we're adding the shock, which is an aversive. One of the side effects is aggression. The other reason that I don't like them is that you can't shock a dog for something that they don't already know. So let's say that I decide, okay, I'm going to teach my dog to come. So I let her go run out, and then and I don't do this, but I'm just using this as an example. Just say, okay, Jade, come. And she doesn't do it, so I shock her. Well, if she doesn't know what come means, if I haven't taught her what sit is or what come means or what leave it means, and then I shock her for not doing it, that's just plain abuse. So you've got to teach the dog what to do anyway before you can use any kind of punishment for not doing it. Most of the time, and I don't know the trainer that you're using them, but a lot of people, like, their timing is off. Your timing has to be impeccable. The punishment has to come from like the environment and not you, or the dog could associate it with you. I've just seen one too many dogs get messed up by using an e-collar, that I wouldn't use them. We kind of have this common joke among us science-based trainers here in the area that I work, is like there's all these trainers that use e-collars, and then owners end up calling us to fix their dogs that have been screwed up by e-collars. And like I said, especially a puppy, 10-month-old, I would never put a shock collar on a puppy. And again, you have that association. Now, the only time I've used one recently was on a deaf dog, and I absolutely did not use the shock. I only used the vibration, and that was just to get her attention, but it's because she was deaf. That's the only time I've used one in the last 10, 15 years. So, yeah, if you have a trainer that's open to, like, if you say, I absolutely don't want to use an e-collar on my dog, if she's open to that, great. Otherwise, I would find a science-based trainer. So you can get on APDT, so Association for Professional Dog Trainers. You can get on CCPDT or IAABC, so IAABC. You can put in your zip code, and it will give you a list of science-based trainers, so that you can find a trainer that's going to do more positive reinforcement and science-based training, so that you don't have to use an e-collar. I actually, when I was looking for a trainer, this was before I was a trainer, I was looking for a trainer, and I called this lady and I said, are you a positive reinforcement trainer? And she said, yes. But then when I met her, she actually used prong collars, e-collars, and stuff like that. So I chose not to use her, and I found a different trainer. So, because there's just so many risks of using punishment, positive punishment, which is like, a choke collar, prong collar, e-collar, things like that. There's just too many side effects, and we never want to use pain, force, or intimidation to train a dog. It's just not fair to them. That would be like, like when you go to the dentist, he always says, okay, raise your hand if you feel pain and I'll stop. So what if he strapped you down and he says, okay, this is going to hurt, but you're just going to have to suffer through it? I mean, that's like intimidation, that's pain, and that's force. We'd probably never go to the dentist again. And so we want training to be fun for the dog. We don't ever want it to be, we don't want the dog to be fearful, and we especially don't want them to be fearful like, oh my gosh, if I do the wrong thing, I'm going to get shocked. So I'm just adamantly against them. And so any trainer that uses them, I would probably find a different trainer. Sorry. But that's my opinion on them. Okay, next one. I went through Zach George's video of not jumping on people, but it's not helping. She's still jumping on people, and even at car doors at the park. Okay, so is this like on leash? Because if you're walking through a parking lot, at the park, I would keep your dog on leash so that your dog can't jump on car doors, because even if you have a good off, sometimes the damage is already done if your dog scratches somebody's car. But so I would teach like loose leash walking and focus on me while we walk by cars. So first I would teach like a good watch me, and a good leash skills at home, and then practice walking through parking lots, and just like practice walking through cars. And the whole time you're walking, it's like, watch me, click treat. Like whether you call it focus, watch me. I usually do a little hand signal where, because I lure the treat up to my eyes, I'll usually do like something like this. So like focusing on me instead of the car. And so you teach your dog to like walk by cars without jumping and reward them for that. As far as jumping on people, again, I instruct people to turn their back and not give the dog attention until the dog has 4 on the floor. But then I will tell my dog to sit. And so I teach my dogs, okay, if you want to greet somebody, you have to sit. Then that person will come and say hi to you and pet you and give you attention. But if you jump, they're going to turn your back. They're going to turn their back, or you can walk. They can walk away as well. But then I step in and I'll do an off or a sit, and teach the dog. If you want to say hi to somebody, then you've got to sit, because sitting is incompatible with jumping. If your dog's sitting, they're not jumping. And then they will eventually learn that I get to say hi to people and I get attention if I'm sitting, but if I jump, they turn their back and they walk away from me. So again, with that, I would probably do it on leash first, just so you kind of have a little bit of control, especially with the cars. And then if people are coming into your house, you don't really need your dog on leash, but you just instruct people to ignore. And sometimes even when I say ignore my dog, they'll say, oh, get down, get down. Well, you're still giving attention to the dog. You're still talking to the dog. If somebody's pushing your dog off, they're still giving them attention. So you have to tell people, turn your back and ignore them, but then you step in and teach your dog to sit. And then when they're sitting, you can say, okay, now you can say hi when the dog is sitting or has 4 on the floor. So sometimes you being really, really consistent and just keep doing it. Lots of repetition on what you want the dog to do instead of jumping. So yeah, I just saw this reply from a Facebook user. Please don't. They're awful. Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I would find a different trainer. I would not put. I've just seen so many dogs messed up by e-collars. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't do it, and I really don't think they're humane. Okay. My dog goes nuts when I come home, jumping and bouncing off of me. Tried sit, stay down, no, etc. Nothing works. Okay, so I actually have that same problem with Jade. She's my naughty dog. But she's so friendly. She just likes to jump and she loves attention. So when I come home, if she's jumping, I totally ignore her and I just walk in. And then I might say, Jade, off, sit. And then as soon as she sits, then I say hi. So there has to be consistency, and you have to make sure that everybody's doing the same thing. So when I worked at the rescue, people would come in and Jade would jump, and then they would say, oh, I don't mind. And I'm like, well, but I mind. I don't want her to jump on people. So then they would come in and they would say, oh, Jade, get down. Your mom's going to get mad. And they would push her off, talk to her, touch her. And I'm like, well, you still inadvertently gave her attention. Saying no doesn't really give the dog any information, because dogs don't know what no means. So if you say no to your dog, it's like, no, what? Don't greet you, don't jump on you, don't wag my tail. it doesn't give them enough information. So instead, I will sometimes use an interrupter. So I'll say, hey, and then sit. And sometimes you have to keep repeating. So like the dog sits, you pet them, give them a treat. If they jump up again, I turn my back, tell them to sit again, and only give them attention and treats when they're sitting. So when they jump, your attention goes away. When they're sitting, they get attention. Or when they have 4 on the floor. So I would just say to keep working on it and be consistent and make sure that everybody is doing it. It's really hard to train when people say, oh, I'm a dog lover, I don't mind. And it's like, well, I'm trying to train my dog not to jump. So if you could please do this, that would be great. So, I mean, you could also teach like a go to your mat. So when you come through the door, and another thing too is I love my dog. So when I come home, I'm like, oh, it's so good to see you guys. I missed you. But I have to do it in a calm voice, because if I get too amped up, I amp Jade up, and then she wants to jump and go crazy even more. So my other 2 dogs that don't jump, I can be a little more animated with them, but with Jade, I have to just say, oh, hi, Jade, you were such a good girl. But I have to keep my energy level down in order for her to be calm. Otherwise, if I say, oh, good Sil, what a good girl, then she's jumping again because she's all excited. So, one, everybody has to be consistent. And when you say hi to your dog, you can still pet him and say hi, give him treats, whatever. Just try to lower your energy level a little bit, just to make the dog a little calmer as well. And I would say just be patient and keep working on it, because that's one that does take time. Okay. So Anita, hi Anita. Okay, I gotta start another column. Actually, I'll go till 7:30, and then I'll do a drawing, and then if there's more questions, I'll stay till 8 and reply. Okay. So I'm not sure what this means. They just use nerve stimulation, same as a chiropractor. I don't think it's the same, because when we go to the chiropractor and they put the stim on, we have the choice. We have the option to say, turn it down, but we have the option to say, no, I don't want that. If you're using an e-collar on a dog, and plus the nerve stim at a chiropractor, that's used to like help something. And again, we have the agency to say, no, we don't want it, or turn it down. Because I mean, I'm going through back therapy right now, so they do that to me every time, and I actually like it. So I'm like, no, turn it up, turn it up, turn it up, and it's like, oh, that's too high, turn it down. The dog doesn't have the agency to do that. They can't opt out. They can't say, oh, that's too high. They don't understand what's going on or why they're being shocked. So I don't think it's the same thing at all. I think it's totally different. But we could argue that all the time. Short answer, I would just find another trainer. Okay, how to get a puppy to stop barking and biting when he wants attention and to play. So, hey Vixen. So that's a good question. For demand barking, like if the dog demands, like is barking because he wants attention and biting, I ignore that, because otherwise you reinforce that behavior and then that works for the dog. So then the dog learns, if I bark and I bite, my owner will give me attention and play. So I will often like, hey, Vixen, come here. What are you into? For those of you that joined late, I have a board and train with me with severe separation anxiety. So I have a new dog with me that I can't leave alone. So she's just kind of exploring to see what she can get into. So I would ignore the barking and the biting, but then it's important to teach the dog what you want them to do instead. So you can teach a quiet. So I will say quiet once, and then like dog is like bark, 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 and then they take a breath, and when they take a breath, I'll click good quiet. So that's how I teach a quiet. And for the biting, for the barking and the biting, I would just redirect to a toy and just say, um, yeah, I can't give you attention right now. I don't want you biting or barking. So here, let's do a snuffle mat, because that's going to engage the dog's brain and their nose, and it's going to tire them out and give them something to do. So if I have a dog that's biting a lot, I will do, like I've explained earlier, the 3 bite strike rule, where first I redirect, second I put them in a crate for 1 to 2 minutes with a toy, and then if they still do it, then it's back in the crate, cover the crate, and they kind of need a longer timeout. But yeah, ignoring demand barking and then redirect your dog into something else. Like, here, chew on this Kong for a while, chew on this Nyla bone. And if your dog wants to play, like, one thing you can do is use a flirt pole, which is really good because you start and stop the game. So you have the toy, you ask the dog to sit, and you can even add quiet into that. It's like, okay, when you're sitting and not barking, then I'm going to throw this out and you're going to start playing. You can grab it, they can play tug, and then you can teach a drop it, and then you pick it up again, and then wait for the dog to sit and be calm, and then you do it again. So that way the dog's not demanding that you play, you're starting and stopping the game, but the dog learns impulse control at the same time. Okay, that's a great question. Lindsay, how do I teach my dog to stay off of the couch? So if you don't want your dog on furniture, don't let them on any furniture. And then I teach an off. So again, like, I'll put a treat in front of them and lure them off and just say, hey, off. And then as soon as they leave the couch, I click treat. But then I'll have like a dog bed or something else, and then have the dog, say, go to your mat, go to your place. Or you can teach the dog, like, if I'm on the couch, I want you to lay down at my feet and do a down stay right here. The thing with this, though, is everybody has to be consistent, because if one person lets the dog on the couch, then they're confused as to why can they get on with one person but not the other. And you actually can train your dog to get on some furniture and not others. So I have a couch that the dogs are allowed on. But because for a long time I was teaching music lessons, and some, the parents would come, and some people, they don't want to sit on a couch that has dog hair. And so I had one chair that was off limits to the dogs. And so if they tried to get on there, I would say, hey, off. And then they would get off. And so they just learned that they were not ever allowed on that chair. And it's like, they get on the couch all the time, but they never get on that chair, because they just know. But it's easier if you want your dog off of furniture just to never let him on. But yeah, you just have to be consistent. And whenever your dog does get on the couch, you can do it like a, hey, off, and then direct your dog what you want them to do instead. Like, go to your place, go to your crate, do a down stay by my feet, like stuff like that. Okay. Sorry, I have to scroll again. I don't know why this thing is so hard to scroll. Okay. Okay, hello from New York. My dog constantly barks and growls at us for attention and jumps and bites. She's 7 months and just started doing this husky mix. Yeah, you have a juvenile. You have an adolescent dog. So you basically have a teenager. So for attention-seeking behavior, I ignore that. I will get up and walk away. and then I will teach the dog what I want them to do instead. So if, I wouldn't play right at that point because then that reinforces that behavior. But you can teach like, okay, but if you sit and you're calm and quiet, then I'll play with you. If you jump on me, I'm going to walk away. If you bite me, I'm going to walk away. If you bark, I'm going to ignore you. And then teach the dog what you want them to do instead. So like, okay, go to your place. And then if you teach like a go to your mat, go to your place, especially, so let's say that I'm home working on my computer and one of my dogs wants attention. I might say, go to your place, I'm working. And so they'll go lay down, and then I will intermittently toss treats to them on their bed for rewarding them for staying on their bed. So it's like they're chilling on their bed. Sometimes they'll have a toy or a nylabone or a bully stick or whatever. But then I will also intermittently toss a treat onto their bed and say, oh, good settle, or, good place, or whatever you want to call it. So I ignore demand seeking behavior. So barking, growling, jumping, biting, when they want attention. So you can get up and walk away, you can turn your back, but then teach the dog what you want them to do instead. So sit and don't bark, be quiet and calm, then I'll play with you. But if you do this, I'm not going to play with you. And again, the flirt pole is a really good impulse control game because the dog has to sit and wait and be quiet before you throw it. And then you start the game, you stop the game. So that's what I would do. Okay, Donna from Pennsylvania. Okay. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on the e-collar question, but I am going to say one other thing. If you have a dog with a really high prey drive, let's say your dog is chasing another dog and you shock it, then your dog's going to associate that. What happens if you go out and you forget to charge the collar? And so then it doesn't work. So it's better just to teach a really good leave it and a really good recall. And I honestly spend like a year working on recalls before I trust my dogs off leash. So I start with a 6-foot leash, 15-foot leash, 30-foot leash. Then I have them drag a leash. I will practice in an enclosed like tennis court, fenced in, or like a dog park when there's no other dogs. And I practice a lot, and I make sure that it's highly reinforced before I let the dog off leash. So I'll just kind of add that in. You can still teach that, but they can malfunction. The batteries can go dead. You can forget to put it on sometime, and then you have nothing. So it's better just to teach your dog the skill that you need. Okay, I have an almost 2-year-old French bulldog, and she is mostly house trained, but still will occasionally pee in the house. So the first thing that I would do is, if it's occasionally, you could go to your vet and make sure there's not a medical reason. Like I think if your dog had a UTI, she would be peeing a lot. So sometimes dogs can regress. I have 3 house-trained dogs, and I even have a dog door that they know how to use, but every once in a while, I will get up and find that one of them has had an accident. So I don't know if it's that they just couldn't make it outside fast enough or what. But again, if you don't catch them having an accident, there's nothing you can do. So it doesn't really matter like why. And if you've had the dog since it was a puppy, and it's 2, yeah, it should be house trained, but dogs can still have accidents. If you rescued or adopted this dog older, sometimes it can take a while for dogs to get a substrate preference. And what we see sometimes is that dogs will have accidents like on carpet because carpet feels most like grass. So, but the main thing to remember is that if you don't catch your dog having an accident, there's nothing you can do except clean it up really good. But if you catch your dog, then you can do the, hey, outside, let's go outside and go potty. And then take your dog outside. And as soon as your dog squats, then say, yes, good dog. So you want to mark that your dog is choosing to go outside and like on the grass. The act of relieving themselves is the reinforcer, but you can then give your dog a treat after as a secondary reinforcer if you want. So yeah, I mean, it might be worth going to your vet to see if there's a reason why your dog could be having accidents. You can also, like Vixen here, that's my board and train. If I can't keep an eye on her, she is potty trained, but she hasn't really learned how to use the dog door yet. I tether her to me so that I can watch her. And that way, if I catch her starting to sniff, hey, Vixen, over here. You can't get in there. Good girl. I'm going to give her a toy. So I will tether her to me so that she's with me. Here, let's give you a slow feeder. I love those slow feeders because it'll keep her occupied for a minute. So I tether her to me, and that way I can watch her. For other reasons too. She gets in the garbage. She's got separation anxiety. It's funny, she's learned how to come in the dog door but not go out the dog door. So if I can watch her, then I will, just kind of keep an eye on her. But if I can't, then, or if I'm like focused on something else, I'll just tether her to me. And that way, if she gets up and like wants to go to the back door or start sniffing or circling, then I can say, oh, do you need to go potty? Come on, let's go outside and go potty. The first couple of days I had her, so she's crated at night right next to my bed. And I would put a leash on her first thing in the morning and actually take her downstairs and outside on a leash so that she didn't have the opportunity to like squat and go before I could get her downstairs. Now she hasn't had an accident, so now I just let her out of the crate and it's like, come on, hurry, let's go potty. And that's the first thing we do is we go downstairs, go outside and go potty, and then they get fed. So yeah, there could be a reason why. It could be that your dog hasn't developed a substrate preference yet. It could be that she's not getting let out enough. Also remember that the more active a dog is, the more they're going to potty. So if your dog's really super active, running around, playing a lot, things like that, they're going to have to go more often. So kind of think about that too. Okay, this one that says Bolt. I'm assuming this is the dog that runs out the front door and runs away. So I would teach, for that I would actually do a stay. So it's not like wait and then we're going to go outside. If you're going out on a walk, then yes, do a sit, wait, open the door, and then say, let's go. If you need to open the door for something else, and the dog's not going to go outside, then I would do a sit, stay, open the door. Like I do this when I get packages. So the dogs will go to the door. I'll say, stay, open the door, get it. And then I'll say, good stay. And then I reward them for staying. So teaching impulse control, I would do a lot of wait. I would do a lot of stay, wait for food, wait to go through the door, for walks, wait in the car until I release you to jump out of the car, wait while I put your leash on you. If I need to open the door to let somebody in, you're in a sit stay, and then make sure that you reward that each time. So yeah, lots of impulse control. In fact, Pupford has a course on 21 impulse control games. So I would actually go through that, because dogs that like to bolt through the door, they just need like more impulse. The other thing that you could do is, if you have to go to the door, tether the dog to you so that they can't bolt. They're on a leash. At one time, I did have a dog that would bolt through the door, so I actually put a baby gate at my front door, so I could open the door. There was a baby gate there, and so I could talk to somebody without the dogs being able to go through the door. And then if somebody was going to come in, I would put the dogs in a sit and a wait, have them come through, and then say, okay, go say hi. So if you have a bolter, you could use a baby gate. That it worked really well for me. And then again, lots of impulse control. Okay, how do I teach my dog not to jump on guests when they come over? Okay, so again, teach the dog a sit. So when your daughter's friend comes over, teach kids like to turn their back and just say, turn your back and ignore the dog. And then when the dog has 4 on the floor, then you can pet him and say hi. Or you can say, teach your dog sit. And then when the dog's sitting, then the friends can come in and say hi, pet the dog, things like that. So think about an incompatible behavior. So if the dog is sitting, the dog can't be jumping. And puppies are going to do that because they want attention. And think about like smaller kids. So when my little cousin who's 11 comes over, he gets the dogs all riled up because he's so happy to see them. And so then it's hard to get like Jade not to jump because Brendan like encourages it, because he like plays really rough with her and gets her going. So, and little kids have high-pitched voices, they flail their arms, and so the dog thinks they're playing. So sometimes you have to teach the kids, okay, this is how I want you to meet the dog. If the dog jumps, I want you to turn your back. And then I want you to ask the dog to sit. And when the dog's sitting, then you can pet the dog and say hi. So I would teach your daughter and your daughter's friend, like, this is how we're going to greet the puppy. And usually if I tell kids, hey, do you want to help me train? Like, how would you like to help me train this puppy? Then they're more apt to be like, oh yeah, I'm helping train. Rather than it's just like, okay, this is what I want you to do. But if they think they're actually helping and assisting, then they're more apt to do it and feel like they're being really important. Okay, I am going to do a drawing right now, and then I will stay another half hour and answer questions. So that way, if you want to stay, you're welcome to stay. If you don't want to stay for another half hour, you don't have to. So let me just hurry and tear these up and draw a name. So tonight's winner is Emily Curry from Virginia. So congratulations, Emily. Okay, so if you want to stay, you're welcome to. And like I said, I'll stay on for another half hour. Okay, so my dog, 8 months old, started grabbing onto us and biting. So I would so I actually walk a dog that does this. Every time I show up, he gets super excited and he jumps and and like will grab my arm, and I just turn and I just say, hey, and I turn my back and ignore, but then I put the dog in a sit. So always think about what's incompatible with what your dog's doing. So if your dog's grabbing on, you could teach hand targeting, because hand targeting has to be done with a closed mouth. If the dog is grabbing onto you, redirect and say, oh, no, can't, but here you can chew on your toy. And when I say, like, sorry, no, I don't use no in the sense that I think the dog is going to understand that, because they don't understand the word no, and it doesn't give them any information on what we want. But sometimes it's just a habit because I did it for so long. But I will usually just use an interrupter and say, hey, oh, you don't bite me, but here's your toy, and you can play with your rope toy, or you can play with your Nylabone, or you can bite this. So yeah, at 8 months, you have a teenager. So your dog's going to start pushing the boundaries now, seeing what he can get away with. So you want to be really consistent with training every day, impulse control exercises like the wait, the stay. This same dog that I walk, when I give him treats, he almost takes my hand off. So I've started to teach him gentle, and he doesn't get the treat until I feel no teeth. So I'll either pull back, or I'll make him wait, and then I feed him like right under his chin so that he just takes it out like that. So we're doing a lot of impulse control with him. So like wait for treats, wait for food, redirecting him to a toy. So it's like, oh, can't chew on me, but here you can chew on your toy. Okay. Let's see. My puppy's jumping on a lot of guests too. If they turn their back, he will jump and happily scratch their backs. So that's when you step in and teach the dog to sit. So you can teach the dog an off. So lure them off with a treat, teach off, and then sit. And then tell guests, only give my dog attention if they're sitting. Because yeah, some dogs, if you turn your back, they'll jump on your back. So at that point, I'll just say, let's sit. And then when they sit, then it's like, oh, good dog. Now I'll say hi to you. Now I'll pet you. Now I'll give you treats. And so, yeah, and using a leash, I mean, that can work. But then if you don't have the leash, yeah, he goes back to jumping. The other thing that I think I would do with this dog is I would start the relaxation protocol. So if you Google Karen Overall's relaxation protocol, or you can email me at tracy@pupford.com. I'm happy to send it to you. It teaches the dog to go to their place, like mat work, and then to stay calm with increasing distractions. And there's like 14 days, but you don't go on to the next day until your dog can perfectly do the one you're at. And you work up to knocking on a door. And then you can like have somebody come in and your dog stays on the mat and stays calm. Then you can teach your dog how to calmly come up and come and sit and greet people. So I constantly have to interrupt Jade and remind her, hey, you got to sit. If you sit, then they'll give you attention, because she just gets so, and she's 2 years old. She just gets so excited when she sees people that she just can't contain herself. But she's getting better, but I've had her a year. So it's taken a year of constantly interrupting, putting her in a sit, teaching her to sit for attention rather than jumping. So let's see. If I block him in one area away from guests, he whines. So I would ignore the whining, because if you give in and let him out, then he's going to learn that works. You could block him. So another thing that I like to do at the door for door manners is when somebody comes to the door, um, especially if I know it's going to be somebody that doesn't really like dogs or is afraid of dogs, I will use the flight cue, which my flight cue is retreat. And so I'll say retreat, and that means we're going to run into the back room or the backyard, and you're going to get a super high value treat that you don't ever get any other time except when we use the flight cue. And then when we've practiced it enough then if somebody knocks on the door, the dogs are like, oh, that's our cue. We get to run to the back and get our super yummy treat. And then if it's somebody that the dogs don't need to meet, then they just stay back there and enjoy their chew. If it is somebody that I want to meet, then I will bring them out on leash and teach them how to appropriately meet people calmly, sit, take treats out of people's hands, things like that. For that dog too, I would use the relaxation protocol, just to teach them to stay calm and not whine, and to like be calm with the increasing distractions. So you literally start out with 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. And it's designed, it's kind of like interval training. So you have a warm up, a cool down. So if you see something, you're like, oh, we already did this. Well, they do that on purpose. So yeah, I would do that. I would teach a flight cue, and then I would do relaxation protocol with your dog. Okay, when walking my 2 dogs and we see another dog, they both start barking and pulling at them. It's frustrating. I say no barking as we are getting closer, and have treats if they don't bark, but most of the time they don't. Okay, so what I do is, if your dogs start pulling and barking, I would just say, let's go, and you're going to turn and go the other way. Because if your dogs pull towards another dog and they get there, then they get reinforced for pulling. And depending on what breed and stuff, if you can't hold both of them, so first I would practice this with each one separately. So if a dog starts barking and pulling, practice the let's go. Or you can stop and practice look at that. So like, oh, look, there's a dog, click treat. And get your dog to look at the dog and then disengage and look at you. So if you Google like look at that game or engage, disengage, it'll pop up. I've seen people post it in the Zach George Perfect Pup place a lot. So you can also do something called a come front, which means come, sit, and look at me. And then I will fast feed, like give treats. And this is for, so the question right under it, this is going to be your answer too. My dog is very aggressive towards other dogs. What can I do? So I lost my train of thought. So with both dogs, I would stop, and you always want to be able to control your distance. So if your dog is over threshold, which means they're barking, lunging, pulling, growling, the best thing to do is just say, let's go, and you're going to turn and go the other way, because you don't want that behavior to continue. Then you want to start at a distance and practice just look at that. So it's like, oh, look at the dog, click treat. And I do use a clicker for this because I want the dog to hear the clicker and learn to like hear the clicker and disengage. Like, oh, I heard the clicker, where's my treat? And then eventually the dog will like look at another dog and look at you like, oh, there's another dog, where's my treat? And then as you're doing that, you can slowly, one step at a time, get closer. If your dog doesn't want to go one step closer with you, then go back to your dog. And one step is not 4 steps. I get really frustrated with people in my reactive dog class because I'll say, okay, go one step closer, and they'll go 4 steps. And then the dog goes over threshold. So it's got to be like 1 step at a time. Always watching your dog's body language, things like that. But yeah, if the dog starts to bark and pull, I just say, okay, let's go. And we turn and go the other way. So that behavior makes it so that they don't get to see the other dog. They go farther away. If they're calm, and you can step off to the side and do a sit stay, and then you can let them calmly meet another dog. But if they're barking and pulling, then I would turn and go the other way. And then I would also, for these dogs, reactive and aggressive, I would work on the relaxation protocol. I would work on a flight cue, which means turn 180 degrees, have the best party and treats ever. I would start working on those and the look at that. So for the person whose dog is aggressive, the first thing I would do is condition your dog to a muzzle. I like the Baskerville Ultra muzzle because you can kind of shape it, and the dog can still pant, eat, drink, take treats, stuff like that. So for safety and liability, I would condition your dog to a muzzle. If your dog is really aggressive towards other dogs, I would actually consult your vet about anti-anxiety meds, because most aggression has an underlying anxiety factor to it. So a lot of times medication can help. And sometimes we can get to the dog to the point where then we can wean off medication. Sometimes the dogs have to be on it forever. And your dog may never love other dogs. Some dogs don't. I mean, some dogs can have 1 or 2 doggy friends and that's it, and they don't like other dogs. And it's kind of like the way another trainer put it to me once is, and I never had like human kids. I've always had 4-legged kids. But she said, like, when I had small kids, I did not expect my kids to play with 100 other kids. Like, they didn't need to have this whole great big group of friends. They had their few friends, and that was it, and that was fine. So your dog may never love other dogs. So that's the first thing that people have to kind of understand. And then you just learn how to manage your dog in public. So really good leash manners, really good focus on me manners, the come front, the let's go to get out of there, and just environmental management, things like that. Depending on where you live, again, you can put your zip code in. If you get on the CCPDT or IAABC websites, put in your zip code, and all of the science-based trainers and behavior consultants will come up near you. I would actually work with a trainer on that. We could also do like a virtual Zoom through Pupford, and I would be happy to help you with that, because it's a little bit more involved than just explaining it here. But if your dog is really aggressive, 1, I would do the muzzle. 2, I would get the dog on medication, and then start working with a behavior consultant to start to mitigate that, because you're going to have to kind of go through this whole training protocol. The short answer is sometimes we need to change the dog's emotional response. So instead of seeing another dog and being like, oh my gosh, I hate dogs, instead it's like, oh, I like it when I see other dogs because I get boiled chicken. But there are some dogs that go from like 0 to 100 in a second. So sometimes there's a lot more going on, like hormonally and chemically and things like that. So you actually kind of need the help of a vet to get medication to help with that stuff first. Another thing you could do is try changing the protein in your dog's food, because sometimes certain proteins can contribute. It's not going to get rid of the aggression, but it can contribute to aggression. So changing the protein can sometimes help mitigate that. So you want to do as much as you can to just help that. And then you're still going to have to go through a behavior modification program. Shoot, there was something else I was going to say. So medication alone isn't going to work. And sometimes training alone doesn't work. It depends on how severe it is. But together they work really good, because we need to get the dog's anxiety level down so he can learn. If your dog is always like hyper focused on environment and is always anxious, then the dog's never in learning mode. He can't learn. So we need medication just to kind of calm him down. Can you talk about preventing and interrupting behavior chains? Smart Aussie quickly developing routines to get cue for incompatible behavior to get treat, such as jump, cue to sit, treat, grab sock, cue to leave it, treat. Mostly happens shortly after a prior reinforcement for cued incompatible behavior. So what I do, because I notice that dogs do this a lot with off, is they'll jump up, I'll say off, they'll get a treat, they'll jump back up. So the first couple of times I will give a treat, but then after that, I will use a different reinforcer, such as just like, oh, good job. I'll use praise, I'll use affection, I'll use something else other than a treat, just so the dog learns that they still did good. I'm still going to praise them. I'm still going to give them a reinforcer, but it's just not going to be a treat every single time. I do use treats when I'm teaching sit or leave it or off. I use treats every time, but once I feel like the dog knows it and then is just doing it to get the treat, then I switch to something else. So then I just start doing praise. I pet the dog. I might even, like lavish on the like, oh, what a good dog. That's such a good dog. Thank you for looking at me, or thank you for leaving that. And then that's all they get. So they're still getting a reinforcer, but they're not getting the treat every single time. But yes, I do see that a lot, and I have seen that in some of my dogs. So I just don't treat every time. Especially if they do it like 3 or 4 times in a row, then I'm like, yeah, you're just trying to get treats. That's not going to work. You can even like then do some mat work. Go to your place, chew on your nylabone for a while. And I'm just going to praise you, but you're not going to get treats every single time. Our lab is 9 months old and she's starting to drool. Is that normal? So drooling can be at 9 months old. I would so she's probably already got her teeth in. Sometimes drooling can actually be a sign of anxiety, but it depends on the circumstance. So, like if you have food and the dog's drooling, that's totally normal. If you are leaving the dog in the crate and you leave and come back and the dog's drooling, that could be separation distress. So it depends on the circumstances. And some dogs will drool like if they're nauseous. So yeah, you might, if it's out of context, like if it's not food involved, then you might want to seek a vet to see if there could be an underlying like anxiety issue. Try to notice what's going on in your environment when you notice your lab drooling. So if you realize, oh yeah, it's every time I'm cooking or it's whenever I have the food, Or if you notice, yeah, it's when we crate her and leave and then come back, or it's when this is happening. So yeah, it could be anxiety. It could be like nausea. So sometimes we will see a lot of drooling if a dog's nauseous. Um, so if there's nothing in your environment that like explains why, or if you figure out, yeah, it could very well be an anxiety thing, then I would talk to your vet about maybe some anti-anxiety meds. Or if it's separation, if your dog drools when you leave, then you would want to work with a trainer on separation anxiety. Okay, we got like 9 more minutes. Socialization for my 11-month-old. So with COVID right now, it's kind of tough, but what I would do is try to find somebody with another dog that is about the same age and size as your dog. Dogs don't really need to meet like 100 other dogs, but you know they are born knowing how to be dogs, and so if you can find like I'm a big fan of like puppy play dates, like bringing a dog over, having your dog go over, and just let 2 dogs play together. And if your dog has like 3 or 4 doggy friends, like you can do play dates with them. But I would try to find other dogs that are around the same size and energy level, or a really good adult dog that has really good social skills. Would be great. Would be great too. And then just set up doggy play dates. Most places now have like these community Facebook groups, and because I see like stuff all the time, like looking for a dog trainer or need a plumber or whatever. But you could say, hey, I've got an 11-month-old dog for doggy play dates, and just see if people will reach out and just try to set up play dates. The humans can social distance and wear masks, although if it gets too rough, then you do want to like step in and give timeouts for your dogs, but you can still social distance and safely socialize your dog. Another thing that you could do, that most of our doggy daycares are, so taking your dog to doggy daycare 2 days a week, just to let them play with other dogs would be great. And that can help with socialization too. Okay, how long is it normal for a puppy to bite due to teething? Any advice? Okay, so sometimes dogs will continue to bite even after they're done teething and they get their adult teeth in. And some of that is like learning history. If they've been reinforced for it a lot, they might still do it. Even if you yelp or say ouch, then as soon as you do that, you want to redirect your dog to a toy. And so they learn like, hey, it's not okay to bite me. That hurts, but here's your toy. Like, here, you can chew on this. Like Vixen's over there chewing on a bone right now. And then, yes, putting them in timeout. So when I do the timeout, I do the 3 strikes. So the first time he bites, I redirect to a toy. If he drops the toy and goes back to biting you, then calmly pick him up with a toy and put him in a crate for 1 to 2 minutes so that he can decompress. And just do a brief timeout, then let him out. If he goes back to biting you a 3rd time, same thing. Then that means he's like really he is either overexcited or tired. So then you calmly pick him up, put him in his crate with a toy, cover the crate. Depending on the temperature, you can turn a fan on, and then leave the dog in there. because they usually need to have a nap or they need to decompress. So yeah, sometimes I will say, ow, that's too rough. But then I will redirect and say, here, you can chew on this. If you want to chew on this. So always remember to redirect the dog to what you do want them to do. Okay, let's see. I'll see if I can answer one or two more. Okay, I have an 8-month-old pitty, and my friend has an 18-month-old German Shepherd. They are great for a while, but occasionally they can't stand each other and start fights. Any ideas? So there's a lot of information that I would need. Like when you say they are great for a while, like then do they get playing too rough? Are they intact? Is one intact? Is one not? Are there resources around? And then when they're playing, do they get playing too rough? Like with my own pit bulls, because I have 3, if they start playing really rough, I will say, okay, guys, let's take a timeout. And then I'll just do a timeout for like 1 to 2 minutes to let them decompress. And then they can go back in and play. Some dogs will self-time out. Like if you see dogs like stopping and shaking off or just like stopping for a minute, I always praise them for that. And I say, oh, good shake off or good timeout or whatever. But yeah, I would need more information. Like they're great for a while, but occasionally they can't stand each other. So when you see that they can't stand each other, what's happening right before that? Is it like there's a food bowl, or is there a ball, or is there a toy? Are they resource guarding? Sometimes if you get in a tight area like doorways or tight hallways, dogs are more likely to fight in closer areas. So start to look at like what's happening immediately before the dogs start to fight. Because then you can change that. And then you also want to kind of pay attention to what is what is the dog getting reinforced for? So like, why are they doing that? Is it because one wants a bone? Is it because one's resource guarding a couch? Things like that. So, yeah. And then I would just always monitor with some dogs. Like I know what my dogs, I can't leave like food or bones or stuff out, but like toys, my dogs don't fight over toys. So I can leave toys out, no problem. Bully sticks, yak chews, things like that, I can't leave those out. We have to have supervised chewing, and I separate them. So one goes outside, one goes behind a baby gate, one goes in a crate. And so I don't ever give them the opportunity to even fight over stuff. But I would also want to know, I mean, the dogs are 18 months old, so now they're in their adolescent teenage stage. Their brains are still developing, and I would want to know if they're still intact or not, because if they're still intact and they're fighting, then I would get them both fixed. Okay. Let's see. So I'm going to, there's still so many questions. Okay, so I'm going to have to stop it for now, but if you want to save your questions for next time, I'm happy to answer them. We've got this fixed now, so next time I should be on like right at 6, and that's Mountain Time. Again, we'll do the drawing between 7 and 7:30, and then I'll stay on for another half hour and ask questions. If you want to put your questions in the Perfect Pup 30-day Facebook group, I try to get on almost every day and answer questions for like a half an hour. So if you put your question in there, I will try to answer it as well. But I've seen some of the comments that other people make, and you can get some really good suggestions from people on your questions too. So I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question tonight, but feel free to join next Wednesday. I know it's the day before Thanksgiving, but we will still do this. So I will see you all next Wednesday, 6 o'clock Mountain Time, and we'll do this again. Okay, thanks everybody for joining, and have a great week.